Hey everybody, I'm Christopher Green. You're watching AMTV, Alternative Media Television. It is, of course, March 13th, 2017. I have John Moore on the program on Alternative Media Television Live. And John, honestly, man, I don't even know where to start today. We just went through a host of stories. Japan is on the move. A very large warship deployed to the South China Sea in a massive show of force. I did want to introduce John a little bit. You can find him at thelibertyman.com. I'm reading his bio here. John Moore first fought terrorism in 1967, an American patriot, a truth warrior. He is still fighting it today. Walking patrol in Vietnam, at night alone, he searched for terrorist booby traps. He searched for terrorist bombs in his Jeep and saw what happened to those who did not find them. JR flew 57 combat missions as a crew member over Vietnam and Cambodia, many of those being hit by enemy gunfire. Very brave. John went on to join the Green Berets at Fort Bragg, where he trained to invade the Middle East. He also did classified studies of Middle East terrorists for the Special Forces, Special Operations, Covert Operations, Psychological Warfare Operations, Undercover Operations, Surveillance Operations, Bodyguard for executives, and stars like Ambassador Alan Keyes, Jane Fonda. John initially turned down the assignment after learning he could prevent collateral damage to innocent parties. He accepted it. Charlton Heston and Pat Buchanan, private investigator and homicide detective. These are the jobs that have kept him busy over the years. Now, he has seen the consequences of terrorism firsthand, and we'll have him weigh in what's going on in Syria and the Middle East today. I think this will be a very interesting episode. He has heard the cries of the wounded and smelled the smoke of the bombs being dropped, which few of us have. I want you guys to all keep that in mind. We do have a lot of you that have served, and thank you for your service to join us here on AMTV and researching and delving into the issue of Planet X, aka Nibiru, I think is how you pronounce it. He has interviewed dozens of U.S. Navy submarine and surface fleet veterans on the subject of rapid global sea level rise, gleaning information from the questions he asks, questions the mainstream media is afraid to ask. How true is that? His investigative prowess has allowed him to produce 2 major videos on the subject of Planet X, videos that are backed up by diligent, comprehensive research, documented history, and scientific fact. John, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Chris. Good to be here.
So let's just get right into it. So with your expertise, your knowledge, your personal firsthand experience on the ground, what in the heck is going on in Syria right now? Why is there this intensification of rhetoric? Why is the media stepping it up a notch? Why am I hearing North Korea is about to strike Hawaii, of which, I don't say any of this stuff lightly. I've got family out in Hawaii. I've had it for generations. Where the heck is this going? Why is it being messaged to us? And how serious of an event is this truly?
Okay, well, let's take these, break them down one at a time. Starting in the Middle East. First of all, the mainstream media paradigm about President Assad is totally bogus. I keep calling him a dictator. He was freely elected. In fact, he was living and working in London as a doctor and had a nice life, and he did not need the kind of grief he's dealing with now, but his dad was getting sick and he decided to come back there and run for president. He got elected. Syria is, first of all, and has been a client state of Russia for decades. It has a warm, deep water port that Russia is not going to walk away from. That is not going to happen. It is critical for Russia to maintain Syria in its current state, so they have access to that deep water, warm port, which is critical to Russia's national defense. On one hand. On the other, Syria has stepped outside the paradigm of cooperating with the New World Order, which is why they're targeted. They were targeted. I just heard a report. I listen to National Public Radio as a matter of opposition research, and a short report yesterday about how the whole civil war began in Syria, where Assad went after the supporters of the Arab Spring in Syria a few years ago, which of course was backed by Western powers. That whole Arab Spring was Western powers, Western money, Western influence, and he knew he had to stop it, and he did, because he didn't want his country to collapse and become cesspools of anarchy, such as Libya, for example, another Arab Spring example. So he stopped it. And was he tough? Of course he was tough. In fact, the only way you can run a country in the Muslim world is by being really, really tough. There is no other way. That's the only thing that works. So he's sideways with the New World Order. the New World Order wants to collapse his government and have it become compliant with the New World Order, so that there'll be another brick in the wall of what they're trying to accomplish.
Now, let me stop you there. So why is Bashar al-Assad not on board with this New World Order agenda? What is your estimation? What is your best guess? It just breeds more chaos in this part of the world, kills more people, he loses power? What?
He doesn't see what's being brought to the table as in the interest of his country and his people. He's acting, first of all, the man's independently wealthy. Well, first of all, he's independently wealthy. He doesn't need anything out of this personally. But he is a native-born Syrian. I'm sure he has some love for his country and his people, and he doesn't want to see it collapse into the anarchy and chaos that the Arab Spring has brought to every country it's gone to. So that seems like a reasonable thing for a patriotic Syrian to do to me, is to act against the interests of the New World Order, to maintain whatever level of civility there was in the country before it descended into chaos, sponsored by the Western powers.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, it makes total sense. How do we convince the American people that, for example, the United States covert operations, military operations, our allies were behind, for example, the Arab Spring movement, these revolutions, re-revolutions in places like Egypt, the taking over of countries like Iraq and Afghanistan, two countries that had nothing to do with September 11th, what's going on in Syria, Ukraine is another example, because what the mainstream media message is that Bashar al-Assad is responsible for 500,000 people dead, innocent civilians' life
lost. Right. Well, that's a fantasy. That's a fantasy, Chris.
It's a fantasy. It's a falsehood. Right?
Well, getting back to your question, you mean convince the American people, the people that vote for our different candidates, those people?
Yeah, in the two-party paradigm, right?
Are you a fan of Mark Dice like I am?
I am. Yeah, very familiar with Mark.
Well, then you know that quest is hopeless, don't you?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Zombies, right? Total zombies.
We've got limited time here. I have the benefit of hindsight. The highest SAT scores ever recorded, Chris, was the year I graduated high school in 1966.
Didn't know that.
The tests have been artificially reduced to artificially increase the test scores 3 times, most recently about a year ago, because it's so humiliating to have these SAT scores keep going down and down and down. So your quest to convince the American people is hopeless. They're consumed. They know what's important: professional sports, Dancing with the Stars, and silliness. Mm-hmm. That's what's important. So the outreach.
So for us enlightened, what is the agenda? For those that are awake, time is limited, like you said. This is happening now, so to a certain extent, we don't have time.
Here's what. Okay, here's something people can do that's real. There's about, I don't have the exact number, about 3,300 counties in the United States of America. Majority of them don't have that many people. The high population counts are concentrated in just a couple hundred counties. Most of those 3,000 counties, there's about 15 or 20 people that decide who gets elected sheriff, who gets elected to be prosecuting attorney, district attorney, who gets to become judges, and so forth. Becoming part of that 15 or 20 people in these 3,000 counties, where you get together, you're 15 or 20 people, and you decide, we're going to elect a Constitution-believing sheriff. We're going to elect a Constitution-believing district attorney or prosecuting attorney. We're going to elect Constitution-believing judges. And from that kind of bottom-up movement, which is basically what the Tea Party was, I don't know how active they are these days, but that's what changes societies and has a positive influence, that kind of grassroots activism.
Mm-hmm. So back to Syria, what is the agenda? What do the powers that be want to accomplish specifically with Assad? I mean, in my view, it's number one, kill him, just like Gaddafi. Let the violence and terror continue to spill over, right, like a boiling pot of water. So unlock that. From my estimation and education, I've studied that they have plans to break up Syria, give part of it to Turkey, part of it to the Kurds. The United States controls the rest of it, and they just kind of continue this insanity ad nauseum. Is there something I'm missing? Like, what do they want principally out of Assad, Syria? Are they ushering in a new global war? What are they doing?
Well, it is a hot spot. high on my list for World War III to begin. It's down at least 3 or 4 from the top. Right now, what's going on in North Korea and in the Ukraine are two of the top places for the Third World War to begin. But it's not so much what they want as what they don't want, Chris. What they don't want is a strong government in a Muslim country that is economically viable and can resist the New World Order. That's what they don't want. They want chaos, they want anarchy, they want to control this and do away with anything that stands against them. And a country that is economically stable, socially stable, is something they want to destroy. And they've accomplished that all over the Middle East, haven't they?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and arguably, I would say Europe is in the same boat. So is the United States. I mean, we've run out of. This is an engineered event, in my opinion. I've seen it on the inside. I was a former, banker working from the inside of a major Wall Street institution, so I know how it works.
Okay, well then you know. Let's go over to North Korea. North Korea is a client state of China, and to a lesser extent Russia, but more a client state of China. I don't believe anything of a major nature done by North Korea is done without the advice and consent of China, although they give the public appearance of being independent and foolhardy and being led by somebody who has a loose grip on reality, as I sometimes say. I believe that Communist China is really calling the shots for anything and everything that North Korea does of any major concern. And that's easily could be a flashpoint for the Third World War. And you have to understand North Korea. You really need to understand China, Chris, and you need to understand the Chinese mindset. We hear racism thrown about a lot here in the United States, but you don't know what racism is till you've been around Chinese in China. Mm-hmm. They know. There's no sense trying to argue otherwise. Chinese know that they're the most intelligent, the most handsome and beautiful, the most athletic, the most productive people on the planet, and every other race is not. And this century, the 21st century, is their century. They're absolutely convinced of it, and they feel that during this century, the People's Republic of China will be the top country economically, politically, culturally, and militarily.
And that's kind of what our perspective, or the American perspective, was kind of through the baby boomer expansion, the economic train ride that it was over the last several decades. So it's almost like China's replaced that narrative, and now they're the future. Is that kind of what you're saying? Or?
Well, yes and no. The American paradigm is to do it by peaceful means, through peaceful trade. The Chinese paradigm is to do what they've done in Tibet, and what they want to do to Taiwan. Taiwan, and it's kind of, if you have to listen to the language, Taiwan has never been part of Communist China, never ever. But they keep talking about reuniting Taiwan to Communist China. How can you reunite something that was never united in the first place, Chris? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what they... Yeah, and they talk about Tibet. Now, in ancient times, Tibet may have been part of China at some point under one of the dynasties, on one hand. On the other, Tibet was never part of Communist China. Communist China invaded Tibet, a sovereign state at peace with its neighbors. They took it over, and they're colonizing it to the point where the native-born Tibetans are becoming a minority in their own country. But that's the Chinese paradigm, is to invade and take over by military means. That is their method of taking over. Or, for example, we beat Germany and Japan in World War II. We did not colonize them. We rebuilt their countries, rebuilt their economies, and now they're close allies of us and not living under the thumb of occupation.
So if North Korea, let's just say, is a puppet of China, nothing goes down without China's stamp of approval, so
I don't believe so. I don't believe so. No,
you
not
don't
at all.
Believe so? Okay.
No.
So get into that. So tell me that relation. So you do believe that, again? Explain that to me one more time.
Well,
here's my point: is the mainstream media is messaging war all across our television sets. They are messaging North Korea, Kim Jong-un. This guy's a loose cannon. He's going to bomb the crap out of us at any moment. Am I expected to believe that as a real possibility, that they're going to pull the trigger? And is this what China...
Well, it's ironic that the focus is what, and you hear this a lot. I'm sure you've heard it, Chris, and your listeners. How far can North Korea's missiles go? Can they reach? Can they reach Hawaii? And the people who are making those statements are, I don't know what their background is, but they don't know what the hell they're talking about. Um, Cargo ships can launch missiles right off our coast, but you don't even need missiles. Now, Chris, um, can you and I agree that semi-literate drug dealers bring in cocaine and heroin by the ton into this country?
Sure. Every
Okay,
day.
of course they do. Well, if men and women who can't even read and write their own language can bring in cocaine and heroin by the ton, why can't a foreign intelligence service, highly trained, highly skilled, with good financial backing, bring nuclear weapons into this country?
Oh yeah, I would say
Of course.
it's happening
Okay,
all the
now,
time, right?
okay, so they do that. Now, do you need missiles? No. All you need is weather balloons. If you want to knock out the United States with EMP, you use weather balloons. You don't need missiles to get them high enough up to set them off and cause the electromagnetic pulse, thereby knocking out the United States. In addition, North Korea has satellites on a polar orbit that go over the United States at least twice a day. Well, there they are. If they had a nuclear device up there, they could do the same thing. Set off the nuclear device 100 miles, 200 miles above the surface of the planet, get the EMP effect, and knock out a big portion of the United States power grid, which of course would knock out the United States.
Mm-hmm. And I've read reports that some 80-90% of the global population could quite frankly be exterminated in an EMP type event, especially if the grid went down for a period of time. And of course, logistically, the grocery stores would be empty, et cetera. Okay, so let's just say, okay, John, I believe you.
Well, they could be used as a by China. North Korea could be used by China to appear to attack us. They may or may not attack us when actually it would be Red China doing it. And Red China is perfectly happy to eliminate as many Koreans as necessary to achieve their goals. These are the same people, Chris, that murdered 50 million of their own people to convert China to becoming communist. Mm-hmm. So why wouldn't they murder several millions of North Koreans by proxy, by having us kill them in a war, to achieve their goal of knocking out the United States?
Yeah, because that was my follow-up question. Is it okay? So we believe that they have the capability. I believe that they do. But let's say our listeners also, that registers with them. They agree with that probability. Why would North Korea attack only for us to wipe it off the map? But what you're saying is it would be used to a greater means to an end in order to invoke this global war. Is it because again, what would our retaliation be?
It would be blamed.
Nuclear bombs
It may or may not be North Korea. We may not know whoever did it. We may not ever know who did it. It would be blamed on North Korea, but Red China could actually be the culprit actually doing it.
Scary. So what's going on in the South China Sea today? So when I read that a massive warship is being deployed by Japan into this area, can you tell us about why this part of the world is strategic? Of course, China's been dredging these islands, these much contested islands, a waypoint for military aircraft, their navy, etc.
There's nothing new about China having ambitions. In fact, I was telling my webmaster about ancient China having wooden ships as large as World War II aircraft carriers hundreds of years ago. Mm-hmm. China's invaded Vietnam several times over the centuries. China needs resources. They have more than 1 billion people. They want to expand, and they're prepared to expand using military force as opposed to their checkbook, like America does. America uses checkbooks to expand, and China uses their military expertise. The Philippines are getting ready to defend what they consider their sovereign territorial waters. There's a lot of oil off the coast of Vietnam that China has got their eyes on, and of course other resources that they want as well. China's intent is to take over the planet, and this is just the beginning of it, Chris.
Very, very scary. And here's the question. What's going through my mind is, how does America respond to this? Right? What do we do to prevent this potentially from happening, and what will they orchestrate? How far will they go? It's quite stunning to think about. So rank for me, in your mind, you said the hot spots of the world: North Korea, Ukraine, Syria. How would you put that in order? Is there something else I'm missing? in terms of risks right now on the global front?
Well, what's going on in Europe with this Muslim invasion, and it can be called nothing but a Muslim invasion, is an attempt by the Muslims to destroy Western civilization incrementally by basically by having more babies than we do. That's the strategy, as simplistic as it is.
And isn't that a mathematical, like that's already been accomplished, right? I mean, isn't it mathematical certainty that that's already happened, so to speak, and that will continue?
It's in the process of happening. It hasn't, or not a majority yet, but it certainly is headed that way. Yes, it's. I was just reading yesterday how Angela Merkel decided to not defend the borders of Germany against the Muslim hordes because she was fearful of the political ramifications of photographs of German police stopping the Muslims at the borders and what that would imply as far as Germany's history is concerned. That's what she was fearful of.
Yeah, and how do we combat that? So if they're having, I don't know the exact numbers, maybe you do, but if they're having 5 children for every 1 child or 1.5 children here in the United States, I mean, wouldn't our leaders tell us to have more children, or they want the takeover? Like, what do we do than to compete?
Well, some of these countries, Sweden's probably lost. Unless something changes, Sweden will probably be lost to the Muslims. Germany is probably still salvageable. There needs to be laws passed that are incompatible with Muslim beliefs, making sure that there's no such thing as Sharia law taking place in these countries. Make sure that these men can't have more than one wife. Things like that make it very uncomfortable for Muslims to live there.
Mm-hmm. Any closing comments regarding global conflict? I want to move on because there's a host of different topics that you're an expert in. I want to move to Planet X.
Well, there is, and Donald Trump is going to be making up for lost time. The Obama administration in the past 8 years was dismantling the military, getting into all those politically correct matters, putting women in combat, which no modern army does that intentionally. People point to the Israelis. They had no choice. They were about to be overrun by millions of screaming Arabs, but the Israeli women are no longer in combat roles. So he's got a lot of catching up to do to rebuild the military and make it a military of warriors as opposed to politically correct snowflakes.
Sure, the liberal, sanitized, PC crowd. Wow. No, I'm just kind of taken aback by all this. We talk about this on a daily basis, but sometimes I process it and just can't believe I'm talking about it. Like, I can't believe that it's this real, that it's just horrifying, actually. Are we strong militarily? Are we weak? Like, where are we in comparison to China, this new rising giant? I mean, are we ready for this? Can we fight a war like this?
Well,
are we going to win? I mean, I'm not too sure.
Well, General MacArthur warned us at the beginning of the Korean War not to get involved in a war of attrition on the Asian landmass. The United States cannot conduct a war of attrition on the Asian landmass. That just simply can't happen. So we're left with basically tactical nukes to fight these people over there. There's no other way to fight them because they just outnumber us too far. You have too many people. Running across Europe with tanks like Patton did is not going to happen in China. It simply is not going to happen. But they already have their beachhead here in the United States. They've had control of Long Beach Naval Shipyard for years. They have these facilities around the United States that are under their control. We don't know how many Chinese are here legitimately as opposed to the Chinese that are here as sleeper agents. We simply don't know, Chris.
Yeah, that's scary to think of. I mean, we know this to be true, right? But we've been infiltrated on a number of levels, right? Radical jihadi terrorism.
Absolutely.
That's been the program. Other states, enemy nations, they're all here. And as we fear, these sleeper cells will be activated at some point. We've already seen this happen in Europe and in the United States, and God knows what comes next. And why have we not protected ourselves? This is what just blows my mind.
Well, it's by design. It's by design. Our recent president, who I call him Hussein Obama, we have our former president was named after a horse. Did you know that?
I did not. No.
Well, the name of seriously, the name of the horse that Muhammad rode to heaven was named Barack.
Hmm. Very interesting.
Little known interesting fact. Yes.
Well, I always call him Mr. Insane in the Membrane, Hussein Obama, but that's a new factoid.
Well, he's a communist Muslim, and he's now 20 blocks, 2 miles from the White House. His favorite communist Muslim buddy, Valerie Jarrett, is living in the same building, 8,000 square feet, 20 blocks from the White House, and they continue their work to destroy the United States. That's their goal.
Yeah. Well, he gave the FBI and CIA carte blanche, the intelligence state, so to speak. This just came out with the WikiLeaks Vault 7 dump. Do you have any comments on that? Anything you want to touch on before we move to some other topics?
My understanding, there's millions of pages that need to be reviewed by somebody or some team, because more than one human being could possibly do, to really get the details. But what can you say?
Sure, I know. It's unbelievable truth that's been dumped, and a lot of it we've got to wade through. And investigative, independent reporters like ourselves, the alternative media, is wading through this. But it's just more proof in the pudding of what we're dealing with. I think you hit the nail on the head, John. It's by design. That's what people don't understand. It's by design, because you ask yourself the question, why would they allow these things to happen? Why are we so weak? Why have we been infiltrated? Why is our systems breaking down? Well, for a reason.